Amber Skog with MJ Lifestyle Magazine. We're a magazine all about elevating the feminine voice in cannabis and beyond. Thank you so much for joining us today. CBD is obviously going crazy right now, and I actually just read that there's over 5,000 CBD brands on the market, which is pretty crazy. So we're already feeling quite flooded. I'd like to introduce our speakers today. Why don't you guys go ahead and take it away?
Sure. So my name is Rod Kite. I'm an attorney with Kite Law Office, and we're based in Asheville and have offices in Portland, Austin, and Greenville, South Carolina. We represent cannabis businesses, but primarily hemp and CBD businesses with compliance, intellectual property, and then general counsel work, contracts and negotiations and corporate setup and dissolution and that type of thing.
Yeah, I'm Brent Johnson with the Hoban Law Group. We're actually a nationwide cannabis law firm. We're a full-service business law firm. So we do everything from corporate securities, mergers, acquisitions, private equity, regulatory work both on the hemp and the marijuana side, tax litigation, intellectual property. We have almost 50 attorneys. We cover about 28 states. I personally, I'm a 20-year corporate securities M&A attorney. I started in Silicon Valley back in '99. So I do a lot of, I'm general counsel to a lot of clients and also help them with their fundraising efforts, and I also set up investment funds.
Hi everyone, I'm MJ Stapley, founder of MJ Hybrid Solutions. We are an online cannabis education and sales training program for all cannabis sales professionals as well as CBD retail stores. And I also consult with a lot of new CBD and cannabis companies as well. That's about all I have.
Hi, I'm Derek Duchesne. I'm the Chief Growth Officer at EcoGen Laboratories. We're the largest hemp-derived ingredients manufacturer in the United States. We are the top 3 leading genetics providers, suppliers in the United States, and we also manufacture and fabricate pre-processing and post-extraction refinements and equipment. Previously, I was at Healing Ventures. I was a customer of EcoGen's for a couple of years before joining the company. Healing Ventures, we launched a handful of brands in the space, in the CBD industry, one of which recently sold very, very recently for eight figures. And yeah, digital marketing and supply chain, been in the CBD industry since 2015, and that's it.
Hey, I'm Brad Slaughter. I'm the president and founder of Nature Secret Holdings. It's a portfolio company that owns 7 subsidiaries, 6 of them being in the CBD market, all different subsects of the CBD market. Before that, I ran and owned California Weed Blog, a news and media company out in California, where I focused on the science, business, and legislation of cannabis.
Awesome. So we've got an incredible set of panelists here, hopefully answering lots of your questions. I kind of wanted to take a poll of the room and see how many of you currently have CBD businesses. Great. And how many of you are in the planning stages of having a CBD business? Okay, cool. Welcome, you guys. Thank you so much. All right, so we're going to get this conversation started right away. I kind of wanted to start in the beginning process. Say somebody wanted to start a CBD. They had a great product idea. I know I do. What kind of advisors should they seek, and where should they be starting at?
Well, sure. Well, I'll answer that from the lawyer's perspective. Of course, I think that everyone needs a good lawyer, but I'm not just selling legal services. It's important when you go into the space to understand what that means. You know, we've got evolving regulations, rapidly evolving laws. It's crucial to understand where things are and where they're going. But also, if you've got and also to set up your business properly. You know, do you need an LLC? Do you need an S Corp? Do you need a C Corp? What type of investment are you going to start with? And then also, from an intellectual property standpoint, if you've got a great idea for a brand, you can't just rush out and put your brand out there. There might already be that brand that's trademarked. And I'm talking to the 10,000 foot level here. But I think talking to a lawyer or a set of lawyers, because all these are different areas of law, I think is vitally important to get your head around what you can do and what you should be doing.
Yeah, agree 100%. The only thing I would add is find a lawyer, one that has business sense and also actually understands the industry, because that's super important.
I would probably say, obviously coming from a side of growing with the CBD company 5 years ago, that obviously you got to figure out who your target customer is, focus on who you're going after. Like you said, there's 5,000 CBD products on the market. Who knows how many tinctures, and really how is your tincture really going to be that different? I know there's a lot of different things that come out, the nano, and different ways to deliver and what people put in it, but you really have to have something that's unique. And if you don't, then you really got to focus on who your customer is and really drive your product through that and through your brand.
I think, these are all lawyer, absolutely.
And get a lawyer.
I think right now, 5,000 brands in the space. Yes, that seems like a lot. This is the beginning of the beginning of the beginning, of a new, raw ingredient that's going to be, I believe as popular as sugar. It's going to be, a couple of years ago, the clients out there were, the cannabis companies jumping in the CBD space. Then it was health and wellness. Now, our customers are tobacco, cosmetics, pharmaceutical, pets, food and beverage. It's every industry. So I think, if you're creating your brand, I wouldn't focus on creating a CBD brand. I'd focus on creating a brand. A couple years ago, we had tremendous success launching CBD brands because, nobody was making tinctures and gel caps. And that's great. Is that the best delivery system? Is that the most convenient thing to travel with? So I think, figuring out really what your brand identity is and what's your differentiator. You need a hero product. You can launch a brand. And we really, like when you're figuring out your identity too, a lot of these, CBD brands out there, they offer 50 different SKUs. You can launch a very, very successful company with, 1 to 3 products. And also you can, you're positioning yourself better for acquisition because you know your brand. And supply chain. Not all CBD is created equal. The cheapest on the market is not the best on the market. And, as the technology and education and research comes out around, the lesser known cannabinoids, I think, what's really interesting is brands that are focusing on those. The last 50 years, THC was the big hero. The last 5 years, CBD. But as, more research and more, crossbreeding of crops and genetics and being able to process and discover these other cannabinoids, these lesser known cannabinoids with incredible pharmacological value. I think that's a good place to look at if you're trying to create a hero product.
Yeah, I basically agree with all that, but and on MJ's and on Derek's point, just first of all, where are you at? What state are you in? What do they allow? What do they not allow? Know your regulations, know your market where you're at. Massachusetts just basically said no to all CBD products, period. So if you're, that was 2 days ago. They just illegalized all CBD products. Yeah, until July 1st. And then DeSantis just signed off on that. So you need to know your regulations more than you even need to know your business. Because if you're not in the right place when you're selling your products, where's your business? You have no business. So know that first. Secondly, get out of the tincture market. Like nobody knows what's going on with dietary supplements right now. The USDA is going to put down regulations, the FDA is going to put down regulations, but nobody knows where it's at. We're still in this gray market with tinctures and dietary supplements right now, and almost every single booth you see has those products. So when you want to differentiate yourself, where do you want to be that's not going to be in a market that's specifically gray right now? Because once it does go into a regulated market, how much is it going to cost to keep that tincture on that market? So find something outside of that you can actually get a niche in, and then on top of that, know what the hell you're talking about. Know what CBD is. Know how it affects your people and how it affects the customers.
Can I piggyback on something that Derek said?
Absolutely.
So Derek, I agree with you about CBD being the ingredient. I have a client who has had a dietary supplement company for several decades. Made his money, the company's running itself, went into retirement and started doing other things, but came back into the industry because with his research and what he did, he believes that CBD is equivalent in its way to salt and sugar and some of these other compounds that have literally redefined the culture that we live in, and so he's back in working like a madman to do this, and so I believe. And also with what you said about the tinctures, this is not about tinctures. This is not an industry about roll-ons. This is an industry about seeing CBD and cannabinoids generally pervade our food supply. And so I think thinking bigger and broader is definitely a piece of what needs to happen for new companies.
Are we talking about Clee Irwin?
What's that?
Are we talking
well, we may be. Right?
Yeah, well, he has an incredible book, and to his credit, the opening of that book is there's 5 ingestible plant molecules that have changed the way that we eat and live historically. First, it was alcohol, then it was there's alcohol, coffee, sugar, chocolate, nicotine, and a lot of very interesting people and brilliant people such as himself.
Well, right. Well, Clee is brilliant and legitimate, and
yes.
he's not someone who's just coming out of left field.
No. I mean,
this is someone who
these are people.
right.
He's a partner at Singularity University. I mean, some of the brightest minds in the world and engineers, and some of the most incredible people that are getting together to solve world problems. His what he says in this book is, and it makes it a very very easy way to digest it, all the different reasons why, CBD, we believe, is going to be the 6th plant molecule to change the way that, the next thing, ingestible plant molecule, is going to change the course of history and be in every single thing, from everything that we're eating, that our pain creams, topicals, and it's not an industry that's been driven on marketing. It's an industry driven on consumer results, and it's because it works. And this statement is not. Yeah, this is not reviewed by the FDA. Yeah. Disclaimer.
Yeah, unfortunately. That was all really great information. I think, Derek, you might be able to answer this question the best. How can you make sure you're finding the cleanest suppliers?
Absolutely. So, I was a customer of my companies for 2 years, and as I was helping market and launch these brands in the space, we did very very well initially, and then we'd have issues with supply chain. And a couple of years ago, I didn't know anything about the supply chain in the CBD industry, and I'm thinking like it's anything else. You can pay somebody for a product, and you get what you're paying for. And that led me down 6 months of fake attorneys, fake escrows, fake brokers, fake it just went down this circus a couple of years ago, pre the 2018 Farm Bill. Nobody had websites. Anybody that was operating hemp, so marijuana, which a lot of my friends had started, these companies. I thought that was going to be a sketchier industry to get into. Well, all of the felons in Colorado that couldn't get marijuana licenses, got hemp licenses. So just a precursor on where we started at, and the first, dive into supply chain, the terms back then was pay 10% of your year deposit. It was bizarre. And after, one company I was working with, we found out, basically, I'll make this as quick as possible, but we found out that they were importing it from overseas, purging it, cleaning it in a small, very small facility, and then distributing it nationally. Then started working with another company. And then, there's an electrical issue. There's a biomass issue, which last year the entire country ran out of biomass. So unless you were importing it illegally last year, then, you couldn't get biomass. If a machine breaks, which they do a lot, you have 2 weeks to 2 months downtime. The tech's coming from, Holland, the pieces coming from China, et cetera, et cetera. There's so many variables and so many things I wish I knew nothing about. And I went through all of these things with all these different manufacturers, and then finally you find a manufacturer that's consistent and reliable, and then half your product shows up and it's testing at 90, 93, 95%. Then you have what's the rest of that, and then sending it out to 10 different labs, because every lab's testing it differently. So there's so many different things that go into your supply chain, and the first thing that I would say when you're finding your supplier, your manufacturer, the first thing you should do is say, I want to come visit the facility. Yeah. Everybody is making claims. Everybody's saying that they're doing X, Y, and Z. It takes 1 amp of electrical to, you can basically base when they're saying, oh, we're doing 500 kilos a month. Great. Ask to look at, of isolate. Ask to look at their electrical. Everybody out there is claiming, we're the biggest, we're the best. Do your research. How many employees do they have? What's, by size and by revenue. Reputation. Fortunately now it's a much easier process than it was years ago. But visit the facilities. Certifications right now, regulation is our friend, but the regulatory laws, aren't there yet. But they will, once regulations kick in, it will be, much easier for the consumer. Right now, what you have to be very careful of is making sure when you're getting your raw materials, understanding that not all CBD is created equal, getting full panel testing, because there's a lot of stuff out there floating around right now that's, 98% that's, people are testing out, and there's, 2 weeks later in a full panel, you'll find lead and mercury, arsenic, you'll find all of these things in there, and it's, it's a very more common than not. So visiting the facility, and just building the relationship with your supplier and your manufacturer, because without the right CBD, you don't have your product, you don't have the brand. The understanding where it's coming from, the genetics, the plant, these are all extremely important things, because, without the right genetics and the right plant, you're not going to end up with the right raw materials. So vetting the manufacturer, I would say first, visit the facilities, and second, depending on what your product is, or what your finished good is, if you're going to do a isolate based, a full spectrum based, a water dispersible based, and understanding what the ingredient is, and just building that relationship with your manufacturer. But visit the facility, get full panel testing on everything, and don't take it because your friend's CBD company bought it from X, Y, and Z. This is great, and yeah, that's it.
Double check the lab testing too. Oh, I have
Yes,
the mic.
yes. So and don't any
Like
lab.
I would call the lab that it came from.
Yes. So any manufacturer that
That's
sends you their testing, their internal testing, and that's how they're selling their product, don't buy from them. It needs to be third-party tested, and you would be amazed by the creativity of like fraudulent COAs out there. So calling those third-party labs and like giving them the number on the COA to make sure that it's actually for for that batch and for that lot.
And the bigger the deal, the more likely it's fake as well. We have it's,
10,000 kilos a week.
Right, exactly. Yeah, so we do a spot buy, and then 10,000 kilos a week after that. And the fact of the matter is, a little CBD goes a long way, and it's probably impossible to determine how much CBD is actually being used, at least in the national market right now. But it's not 10,000 kilos a week. That's just there's not that. So the bigger the deal is, the more likely it's fake, and the more of a need there is to vet it. And it's just to follow up on yours about going there, this is an industry where, on the one hand, it's highly innovative, and so much business is done on the phone, text message, Skype, whatever. But by the same token, the old school ways of going and meeting the person face to face and looking at the lab and identifying what you have is just, it's crucial and vital.
Yeah, I think all of that information is really vital. Did you have something to add there?
The entire United States combined does not consume or produce 10,000 kilos in an entire month of isolate. So just people, these unicorn orders and clients and all these things. It's for Italy, it's for the government, it's for catering. We've all heard everything, and you have to understand how much biomass it takes to make 1 kilo, much less 100 kilos. I mean, you need, if you have somebody saying that they're doing thousands of kilograms a month, you have a train track that's just running through your facility, dropping these off every day, because we have semis 3 times a week that's dropping off biomass from our own farms, and that's still not enough to get to the numbers that that everybody's claiming out there. So
and what are the odds that that Coca-Cola or Gatorade is actually going to be sourcing from some sketchy guy that just
well the thing is, because there's so the margins have been so high, and now everything's coming down and commoditized. Like when I was buying CBD, originally it was $20,000 a kilogram. Now it's $4,000 a kilogram. And CBG was $50,000 a kilogram. Now CBG's $25,000, $30,000 a kilogram. CBC, CBN, $80,000, $90,000 a kilogram. So as it becomes more and more commoditized, which we're looking forward to, and the market's going to be going to continue to go down, and it's going to be more and more, and regulations, it's going to be more and more in the consumer's favor. But right now, all of these, like you said, that 1 kilogram goes a long way. I mean, you look at it, a tincture is 500 milligrams, right? So that's 2,000 units per kilo, and it's just the volume out there is doesn't make sense. That's all.
So we're moving right along just because we are already running low on time.
Sorry.
Is there a place to maybe seek answers for how much you can expect to pay for CBD or CBG or CBN?
So there's a couple of pan exchange. There's commodities trading markets that are now coming online. One of them is called Pan Exchange, and these are places that traditionally, are where you can get, corn, soybean. You can check agricultural, kind of pricing. But I would say, your best bet is just call, on the raw ingredient side and manufacturers. There's really, 3 big players in the United States, and just call, shop around, and and find the best pricing.
Great. As far as cultivation and hemp farms, I'm assuming we've probably seen a surge in hemp farms. Sorry, I just lost my train of thought. What are some of the disadvantages to regulation? Is it regulated similar to the cannabis plant as far as having your own farms? I know you, Brad, you had just mentioned that Massachusetts just made CBD illegal, so does that mean there's no farms? What exactly does that mean as far as regulation?
Well, it's mainly in the sales of it. So they're not, because basically they're positing on what the FDA is possibly going to say, because they technically haven't legalized any of this for use of recreational sale. When it comes to any dietary supplements, any type of edibles, anything like that, they basically stated once the Farm Bill passed that we still have our ability to govern on our side. We have not decided how the efficacy or what to properly regulate hemp and these edible products, dietary supplement products are. So with that being said, nothing should be legal for sale on a standpoint on a national scale on a retail sale line. And this is on their page for the FDA that they stated that. So everyone saying that it's legal and it's all above board is frankly dead wrong.
Yeah.
It's just all in the gray area right now. But on the farming side, it's an agricultural crop now. It can't have insurance on it. You can put futures on it. Like, everything is becoming commoditized that way in the hemp side. And, CBD is just one aspect of the hemp market, which is why it's going to be so vast, because you can do industrial size. You can do hemp seed for cold pressing and sale. Like, there's so many different aspects of the hemp market that you can really venture into. Yeah, exactly. Like, you can get into so many different things with that. So on the hemp farming side, there's a vast array of market that you can do, not just flower.
Mm-hmm. Got it.
Yeah, so I'm going to step in and just talk in general about the regulatory scheme, because I think that's important to understand. There's, obviously there's, if you look at the CSA, there's the cannabis sativa L plant, right? If it's got less than 0.3% THC, it's excuse me, by definition hemp. So when you think about, there's the marijuana side and there's the hemp side. So let's put marijuana aside for now. On the hemp side, it's now fully legal at the federal level, and so that we do know that. However, it's regulated by the USDA, so we're still waiting for the USDA to give us some guidance on how we get seed, how we transfer seed, how we grow seed, how we plant it, and how we process it. So those regulations are still in process. The FDA obviously has their say in how you can make claims about products, etc. But then each state has their own regulatory framework, and so even though it's legal at the federal level, there's still all these other layers of regulation and adoption state by state that have to be kind of enacted to make sure that you're compliant both at the federal level and at the state level.
So it's, on the farming side, it's really putting the power and the profits back into farmers, back in the American farmers' hands. I grew up in a small town in northern Wisconsin, and rural America, the farming industry, has just been going south for quite some time for a lot of different crops. The prices just dropping and dropping and dropping. Right now, a pound of hemp for decent hemp is $50-$60 a pound. So these farms have been extremely profitable for the last couple of years that have gotten into this space, and Colorado, Kentucky, and where the pilot programs were allowed. Now that it's federally legal, and we're a big genetics supplier, so we see where it's growing at and what states. And Texas just came online, Louisiana just came online, and it's really exciting to see this money, these farmers being able to grow their businesses and provide for their families and for these small communities and give back. And I think that as far as every week there's a new every other week there's a new state coming online for the farming. And as to what he was saying, it's not just the CBD isolate. If you look in China right now, so the isolate in oil, like that's this much of the hemp trade. It's carbon fibers, hemp plastics, hemp biofuel. There's so many different uses for the plant. So it's a very exciting time for farmers.
Yeah, I can imagine. Okay, so I have a partner in California, CBD brand topicals, and they have been, they've lost their banking several times, and they're actually now taking Venmo, so, which is crazy. Obviously, what needs to happen? We need to educate our lawmakers. We need to educate, obviously, banking systems. What do you foresee as far as how can we educate? How can we really increase this? Who's speaking to the USDA to kind of help along with those regulations?
Well, this is, to be clear, it's not a USDA type issue. I mean, it's absolutely clear hemp is lawful. In fact, banks can, based on a FinCEN memo that was put out several years, theoretically they can bank marijuana businesses if they want. Yep. The banks are highly uneducated about the issue. They're also nervous, and frankly, as big as the industry is to all the people in this room, it's just a fraction of what national and international banks are doing, and so they're moving slowly. I have a client that has a golf brand, and which I think is a great market. It was a fairly novel market, and had a quote in the most recent edition of Golf Digest. And as you might imagine, when that went live, their website blew up. The day before, the merchant processing went down, and they did not sell any products. And that can be devastating to a company. So you're absolutely right. The merchant processing is not there. As far as what to do, I think it's important for anyone who has a company, lawyers who are representing companies, to identify banks that your customers or clients are either working with or that you want to work with, and go meet with them. A lot of these boards of directors are interested. A lot of the bank presidents and vice presidents and head of loans and sales, they use CBD products. They know about them. They're interested, but they don't have the education and to be able to say, well, this is who we are, or if you're a lawyer, this is a vetting framework we think you can use. So the banks are interested, but they're moving slowly, and it requires, I think, a top-level entry point to educate them so that they can educate their boards and make some new decisions on how to vet.
Yeah, and I will say, I mean, the issue around banking on the marijuana side is that marijuana is still a federally illegal substance, and so the big banks, it's not worth them to touch it because it's too risky, and why even do that when it'd be such a small part of their business? Now that hemp is fully legal, we should see big banks open up and start opening up bank accounts, because that's their big kind of hurdle was the federal illegality of marijuana. Now that hemp is fully legal, we should see big banks opening up. But there is an education process to that.
I think it's already starting to. There's already some big pushes from some of these big banks that are already starting to accept hemp CBD companies right now. It's really starting to come into the framework, and it was going to take a while. Everyone knew it was going to take at least a year or so after the Farm Bill passed for everyone to start realizing that this is an agricultural crop. And a lot of the banks right now are basically still waiting on what is the FDA going to say, how are the regulations, and what's going to be the process. Because until they figure out what all these federal governments are going to do and what the regulatory standards are, they are kind of still considering it like marijuana. Like, how are we going to do this correctly? Because we want to make sure that we don't have any processes that we have to go through, any loops that we have to jump through. I mean, just, on Rob's point, I mean, you can technically bank cannabis companies. You can do that. You can make it as a high-risk company. There are a lot of smaller banks that are doing it right now, and they have cannabis companies in California and Colorado that have banks from small local banks that are state banks, and they do take them as high-risk accounts, just like they do casinos and whatnot. But it's just, why would they go through that process right now if they have to jump through all these hurdles? So it's just waiting until the governance has gone through.
Yeah, and just to tag on there, so there are definitely banks that are banking both sides, hemp and marijuana, but they're all state charter banks and credit unions. I think the number I saw most recently was maybe 473 banks across the U.S. that are actually banking at the state level. But Wells Fargo's not doing it, Chase is not doing it, the big banks aren't touching it yet. But hopefully we'll see that freed up on the hemp side here shortly.
Well, I think you got to continue to attend, be a part of the lobby days, things that happen. There's local bank meetings, there's local cannabis hemp meetings, like things that go on in your hometown. It starts there, right? And as far as education, you got to understand what level of education they know, so that you can speak to them based on what their thought process is, because they need to understand it from their level. And obviously with lawmakers, a lot of that's going to be with clarity from the government and from regulations. They want that clear picture, but you just got to keep educating, keep attending, keep being a part of everything, because right now we're all in this together as it grows.
Yeah, the last thing I'll throw in there as well, I mean, until the big banks open up, you will typically have to pay more for typical banking services, just because of the risk. They have to up their fees just to cover their, cover themselves.
Yeah, every 2 months, for the last couple of years, CBD brands seem to, you have to, your payment processing, merchant processing gets shut down. As of, recently, JP Morgan Chase has opened up banking services to the hemp CBD industry. So go to JP Morgan Chase if you're looking for banking services. Merchant processing is still gray, but, they've opened up banking services and corporate banking services and all of that for the hemp industry. Bank of the West, Bank of Albany, these are all great choices that a lot of our, brands and companies use. Merchant processing, if you're gonna do it, find a domestic processor. Square, which is an incredible company, just opened up a pilot program for hemp and CBD brands. They're getting flooded with inquiries, but we've had a couple of brands turn around within a week to 2 weeks with Square. So JP Morgan, Chase, Bank of the West, Square, it's a great place to start.
And Venmo.
And Venmo. Well, I was going to
cash.
say, I was almost positive that it was JP Morgan that said we don't distinguish between CBD and marijuana. That was a couple months ago. Has this just...
Yeah, so it's policy. It's not laws, it's policy, right? Like PayPal, PayPal shut down my account. PayPal shuts down everybody's accounts, and it's policy. It's not legalities. And JP Morgan and their entire their head of investment banking, their team's been out to our facilities, toured everything, and they, from the commercial banking side, the investment banking side, JP Morgan Chase very recently opened up. Bank of the West,
That's awesome.
Bank of the West we've banked with for a while previously. Albany Bank, a lot of clients are with them as well. So it's finding, and you shouldn't be paying higher fees because you're a hemp or CBD company. And also when you're talking to your banker, you also don't, if you're getting these sorts of things other than merchant processing, and you just want to work with your current bank and open up an account, you're a nutraceutical company, you're a cosmetics company, you don't have to go in there and say, I am a CBD company, because that's a raw ingredient, for your products.
On top of that, I would say that it's absolutely right to go in and say we're a nutraceutical company or cosmetics. By the same token, with merchant processing, you don't want to lie or misrepresent what you're selling just in order to get it through on the short term, because that's going to affect you on the long term. You can get your account terminated possibly forever, with doing these things. So there are different ways to state what it is that you're selling, but you absolutely don't want to misrepresent that.
Yeah, I meant for commercial banking services. I didn't mean for merchant processing. For merchant processing, you have to be transparent with everything, because if you get flagged on there, it's not good. So, but for commercial banking.
All right, so we're almost ready to open up the questions and answers. I just wanted to kind of ask one question. We know it's inevitable that CBD is going to be in every product that exists, in my opinion. I mean, you're going to go to Target and you're going to be able to buy whatever you want, for your hemorrhoids, for your, sorry, I don't know why that just popped into my mind, but, any sort of medical, thing that you need. How long and what needs to happen before you think these big places like Target are going to be, or brands are going to start jumping on?
Well, FDA regulation, sorry, I'm part of this one.
The FDA is going to have to come out with at least an interim rule. And at the FDA hearing on May 31st, we were there, and it was interesting that there were pharmaceutical reps, there were cosmetics companies, there were hemp growers across the board, and a lot of divergent interests. But the one thing that literally every single person agreed on was that we need some guidance from the FDA and regulations. And these big box stores, they're big ships, and they don't turn nimbler. That once they make a choose to move in a direction, it's a big deal. And so they're going to do it, but they're going to wait until they have some pretty direct guidance, I think, from the FDA.
But I will say that it's, they're already in their R&D about it. Like, they're already looking into
right,
it.
like Coca-Cola.
It's already happening. Anybody that thinks that it hasn't already been thought about, I mean, Canopy, they're technically not in America yet. They've acquired acreage, but I already know 3 of my business partner's clients. He does securities, like 3 major farms in different areas, 150, 200 acres that are already being bought up by a Canopy. Like, it's already happening. And once the FDA goes down with that, you don't think the big companies already know what's going to happen? They already see the writing on the wall. Like, they already see what, where it's going to go. They'll find out first what's going on because they got their ear to the ground. They have the money to have their ear to the ground. So they'll know once that passes, within a week, they'll have their stuff going out. It'll already be mass produced and ready
Right,
to
like
go.
they've
So,
already got their
Right.
formulations ready
and
to
they're already
go.
talking to people for mergers and acquisitions. It's already happening.
Anyone else?
It took 9 months for us to get products on, from the initial conversations, to on the shelves with CVS. It took us 9 months. That was last November, December, and that was a big step forward for the entire industry, for a big chain like that to take that on. Now, so many drugstores and chains have taken, at the checkout counter, and it's not just these health and wellness kind of companies. Target is looking for brands. A lot of the companies that do the white label manufacturing for, Kroger, et cetera, are all looking at the space. It's a very, very short matter of time, I believe, before these big box retailers open up for it. It's just that in the United States, you have 4 different agencies and regulatory companies. One says yes, one says no, one says maybe, and every week they're changing. California Department of Public Health last year said no hemp-based CBD products in anything because they weren't taxing it like marijuana, and then or no hemp-based CBD ingestibles on the shelves anywhere. So then we literally had to take all these brands and take all these topical tinctures and label them as topicals, and then FDA said no CBD isolate-based products in food and beverage, and then California Department of Public Health came back out and said, yeah, we can put CBD in everything, and isolate's great. So it's it's an ongoing and ever-changing landscape, but it's already happening. It's already here. The R&Ds and the M&As are already happening. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I think it's clear to see that nothing's going to happen overnight. It's all just one foot in front of the other and just kind of a wait and see type of situation. Do we have any questions in the audience? Yes? Oh, sorry.
Okay. You touched on it a little bit, talking about canopy growth, but obviously this is going to be a global industry. How do you see the international markets affecting the U.S. market in the future for CBD?
It's going to affect them vastly. I mean, it's going to be just like any other market that's legal. I mean, the good and bad part about global markets is that yes, we can get cheaper products outside and be able to outsource, but it's going to affect our farms and everything out here on this side. There seems to be this veil that people think that just because it's the cannabis market or just because it's the hemp market, we have the best stuff or California has the best stuff, and nobody's going to be able to take away from that. But it's just going to be like any legal commodity. We're going to outsource it. We're going to go to Colombia. We're going to go to China. We're going to go to all these places. We're going to get it for a lot cheaper. It's just going to happen that way. Yeah, and that's why hemp is going to be great as a commodity for industrial purposes in the U.S. because when it comes to a CBD flower side, we're just going to get a lot cheaper somewhere else.
With that, regulation, is our friend, and the problem right now with synthetics and international markets and imported product is, hemp is such an incredible, it's a sponge, and it's grown in a lot of places where the soil is either over fertilized or toxic. The stuff, everything that's coming out of China right now is toxic, and as these international markets open up, yes, it's going to be more commoditized. Hopefully regulations will be up to speed before the international markets open up. But I think that, just like anything else, there will always be a high demand for a made in America, hemp-based quality CBD. If you're in China, where are you going to buy your Louis Vuitton? America, right? So that's, I think that there's always going to be that demand, and, and that understanding your supply chain is incredibly important. I cannot emphasize that enough. Understanding, where your raw materials are coming from, and unless you're going to fly over to, Colombia or fly over to these other places, which are beautiful places to visit. I just think that as it becomes more and more commoditized, and the efficiencies in the industry, we can't wait for CBD isolate to be $300 a kilo. We can't wait, because then it's going to open up international markets. It's going to be, so much more readily available. So many more brands are jumping into it. Like, we're driving that price down, and because then the volumes are going to be so great, that the margins don't need to be there. So I think that international markets opening up, I think may even increase the the hemp demand for American-made product.
If you all had a crystal ball, when do you think corporate American banks will open up to hemp money?
They already have.
Which ones?
JP Morgan Chase.
Zero, what's the red tape in doing so?
Yeah, as far as you can call them and say that you have a hemp CBD company, and they will. I'm unaware of their merchant processing right now, so I don't want to spout that. But they will accept commercial checking, banking, and as you stated before, there's crop insurance. There's all these different products and commercial banking services that are coming out that now these large institutions are getting into.
Do you know what their protocol is?
I do not.
Thank you.
All right, we have time for one more question. Gentleman in the back.
Another crystal ball question. Could you all predict what the FDA is going to do when they make a decision? And secondly, is isolate going to be differently regulated than whole plant offerings?
I'll take a stab at that. The FDA said it's going to take 3 to 5 years. That's obviously kind of crazy in this industry. It's been pushed. Senator Wyden actually wrote a letter, I think it was yesterday or the day before, asking that the FDA at least enact an interim rule to provide some guidance. And so I think the answer to question A is I think we'll get some guidance here pretty soon. I think the FDA has two options. One is to actually allow CBD isolate, but probably in up to certain limits and purity levels. The other, which could go along with that or be instead of that, would be for the FDA to acknowledge, at least publicly, that hemp extracts that contain CBD are in fact lawful and can be marketed as dietary supplements, notwithstanding that they have CBD, but perhaps prohibit CBD isolate. I personally think, crystal ball-wise, we're going to have both. We're going to have an express approval of hemp extracts and also some sort of an allowance of the CBD isolate, but within certain parameters.
It's quite mind-boggling that they don't have somebody on it. I mean, aren't they scientists?
They have a new working
It has,
committee.
it has nothing to do with that.
Oh, okay.
I mean, first of all, we're talking about the government. So
True.
not only is it a ton of red tape and they go very, very slowly, but there's also corporate interest in it as well that's driving the market. And the only curveball I would throw into this is I believe that there's going to be a different standard like they have with OTC and behind the counter. GW in that meeting that they had on the 31st, they talked about how, well, we went through all these FDA processes. We went through all these test trials. Why is it that all these CBD companies can sell this, recreationally OTC, but yet our product had to go through all these trials to become Epidiolex to treat 2 forms of epilepsy? So I think there's going to be, this might not be immediate, there will probably be certain expediting protocols, but I think there might be a plan where they separate just like in medical cannabis, this is going to happen too, where they're going to separate the, how much levels of the cannabinoids they have, of CBD, of all these minor cannabinoids, whether they separate of isolate CBD is the only thing that can sell OTC or whatnot, and then there's going to be another protocol of what's going to be behind the counter, and that's going to be the exact same thing that you're going to see when they legalize medical cannabis. Like, I don't see that how it's not going to happen, where they're going to have a minimal level of recreational is 15, 20% THC, and then everything above that is going to be medical, and that's going to be behind the counter for a prescription.
With that, all these key points, it's, GW Pharma, it's a synthetic CBD. So, there's another big argument there that, because if you're replicating something in a lab is, yes.
It's not. I've read the clinical studies and I've talked to the people that have done. It's plant derived.
It's plant-based.
It's from marijuana, but it's not synthetic.
Right. That's the reason it had to be
Marijuana is synthetic.
rescheduled, is because it's from marijuana, and so and CBD's legal status depends on the plant from which it's derived. It's a marijuana-based plant, and it's had to be rescheduled so that it could be prescribed for that reason. But it is a natural.
Got it. So I must have read the wrong research. I apologize. What I read, it was a synthetic-based. So I retract my previous statement. Isolate, I think, as yes, if they limit, say a purity amount, right? But nobody's buying. Very small market for people that are buying isolate as consumption, right? On a manufacturing side, it's the superior, raw material, because for formulating for international, because there's no, THC, because it's consistent. Every time you run a different batch of a plant material, you're going to get a different, oil or distillate out of it. But with an isolate, you can get that consistency. And so right now, every product, if you're looking at products in Sephora, CVS, and these sorts of places, these are all isolate-based products.
The product you were just talking about, that's a big pharma product, right?
Yes.
That's what I thought. We have just one more question.
So my question comes back to the international element. I think for US companies, they're starting to look abroad, and you see Gencana and Mile High in Europe. If you have your own brand in the United States and you're looking to capture market share internationally, what are the top 3 consumer countries that you would be going for? Would you be going for Singapore, Korea, Germany, England? I think that's an interesting opportunity for American brands. Or by region, if that's easier.
I'll take a stab at that. The last investment conference I went to down in Miami, they were talking a lot about where the market shares are going to be at. A lot of it's going to be like Western Asia, a lot of specific areas in Europe, Southern Europe, and South America. There are certain